Hey everyone, welcome to Living in the Question podcast. I'm Sadie.
I'm Maddie.
And we have Tim Rothschild with us today. Hi, Tim.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. We're so excited to have you. We've had you so much on the podcast already, but today we're just excited to really dive into who you are too and how you started your spiritual journey. So I'm just excited for everybody to hear who you are again.
Sure.
I feel like the last couple episodes, me and Maddie have really been going through a lot. So we have to talk about those things because that's where we are, right? But this episode, I'm really excited to focus on community, our community and where everybody is and where everybody's going and us too, right? So I feel like the biggest topic today is divinity. And what is divinity? How do we encapsulate divinity in our society, and throughout our everyday lives? So I feel like that's our big topic for the day.
But I think, Tim, if you want to start off by introducing yourself and how you got into this spiritual realm and how you became such a huge part of this spiritual community, and now you're a leader and a teacher within that, share with our listeners your story of how you got here and what you're doing right now.
Sure. My name's Tim Rothschild. I live outside New York City, about 20 minutes north in the Hudson Valley there. It's where I raised my family. And I actually grew up in this area. And I'm mentioning that because it's where some of the sort of the big events that sort of solidified my fascination and curiosity and knowing that the world and reality was much larger than I initially thought it was. I was raised Catholic, confirmed Catholic, and all that kind of stuff. But because I saw how crazy adults were, I rejected it at a very young age. And I say it, I don't know if you know this about me, I used to write I used to special request all my essays in college to disprove God and religion and miracles. I made it my mission because I was like, this stuff is silly and people need to wake up to be more practical and live their lives. So that's where I was, and I was very much a beer drinking football player, a frat guy and an athlete. And that's all I knew. I was like, all right, I'm going to do sales. I'm going to make lots of money, buy houses and live my life. Right. But my senior year in college, life had other plans. And very sadly, my brother, who I was very close with, he's 2 years older than me, was killed in a car accident. A few months later, Christmas morning of all days, my girlfriend died of a heart attack. It was wild, For somebody like me, I had no idea about healing. And believe it or not, my mom was a doctorate in psychology. She actually taught at Columbia with Albert Ellis. So she's like a brilliant woman, but we had our differences. And I looked at her and I said, well, that doesn't work. So I just rejected all sorts of healing in general, and I said, I'm going to hang with my friends. My friends are my therapists and the bar is my therapy room. And that's how I'm going to live my life, and it turns out that's not a great way to live. And you don't actually end up dealing with anything, right? So, fast forward 5 or 6 years and I'd really put myself in a hole. I'd become very addicted to sex, drugs and alcohol, partying. I at the time I had no idea, but I really not much of a connection to my body. And really everything I did was to save myself from feeling. So I took it to the nth degree. That's just kind of my personality. I will myself to the end of time without a lot of consciousness around what I'm actually doing. So I can push myself through some really difficult things. Yeah. But sometimes it's hey, why'd you do that for 5 years? You could have just paid attention and taken a right when you took a left.
Do you feel like you're not alone? So many people live that way. We all have our things we're kind of running from, right? So I just want to say that if you're feeling that way, then I'm sure a lot of other people are, and me too,
It's so interesting to hear this part of your story because I've only known you in more recent years. So it's kind of inspiring because it's this dude was living like that. It's pretty cool to hear.
I'm glad it's cool to hear because I do it makes me nervous to tell my story a little bit because it's all right, we gotta tell this right. And the reason why I say that is because I use my life as the way I teach a lot of the time. I think of myself as somebody that's really living this work. At least I try. At some point a teacher might reveal to me that I'm a hack, but for the time being, I believe that I'm really on this path and I want to do it right. So because of that, I can use my life as a teaching tool because while it's really shameful, I was not a great guy in a lot of instances, I healed and I'm healing. You know, it's not perfect, but it speaks to the testament of the process and so on. What I'm getting at is, you know, there's a point when I really couldn't get out of bed without like a beer or a pill or something. I was still outwardly successful, beautiful women, playing sports. I was very athletic, successful at sales. I was charismatic enough that I could get away with it. I was a high functioning addict. All during this time, keep in mind, I have no understanding of a larger reality because I was disproving it. All during this time, since my brother died and my girlfriend died, occasionally I would have dreams of hanging out with them. Didn't start that way, actually. It actually started off as very terrible nightmares because it was a very traumatic situation and so on. And I did see them kind of messed up. So, you know, that has an impact. But over time, the nightmares moved to something else. And now looking back, I know what was going on. But at the time, it was more like, hey, I would wake up and it would be such a special experience to have spent the night hanging with my brother, doing what we did in real life. So we'd be hanging at my mom's downstairs. We just got back from the gym. We're smoking a bowl, having a glass of whiskey, eating 4 pieces of grilled chicken, watching the latest show on HBO. I think it was like Entourage at the time or something like that, right? Setting the scene, right? So I would have these dreams with him, and there is a reason why I'm sharing this. And I would tell my friends, I'd be like, this is cool. Like I was hanging with him last night. And I was like, there's something about these dreams. They're really nice, you know? And every now and then, Alex, my girlfriend, would show up and we'd hang out and so on. Anyway, there came a point though when I was getting deeper and deeper into my addictions. Like it was like, you're either going to fix this or you're going to die kind of thing. And while that was happening, I had taken a job, I took a risk and I took a job selling solar before solar got popular. It's not what it was today. It was still pretty cool. Like everyone was like, oh, you're a solar guy, you know, like tell me about it. You know, people weren't like door knocking, forcing the sales down your throat. These dreams that I was having started to change as I took that job and I got introduced to a guy named David Weiss. Now, David Weiss has since become somewhat infamous or famous, depending on your view. But at the time, he was he's still one of my best friends. We don't hang because his cosmology is so different. But I digress. He introduced me to conspiracy theory, 9/11, but also like this alternative history of the world that may have included things like giants. I'm just like, I was like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? Like this is wild. Like, I can't believe. But he was so charismatic and lovable and kind that he sold me. He got me interested. He was the best salesman I ever met. He taught me everything I know about sales. And I was like, oh my God, dude, like there might be something to this. And so I was so impressed by it that I dove right in, and I was able to dive right in. Again, it's a sort of like, thank you, God, for hooking this up. But I made a name for myself in the field because, again, I was a good sales rep, but the industry relied on government incentives. The government incentives went away, and my company said, stay with us. We'll give you a credit card. We'll give you a car. We'll pay for your gas. We'll give you a salary. Just don't work for anybody else. When the incentives come back, you come back and work for us. So this went on for 2 years. So I called that my spiritual scholarship because it happened right as Dave woke me up. Really, he woke me up to even the possibility of a larger reality. And I was fascinated because I was dead inside, right? And it finally felt alive. I was like, oh my God, if any of this is true, I have a reason to live again. So I went after it, you know, and luckily I was smart enough to know that I didn't know enough. So while I was researching like everything I could, and really, because again, I didn't know myself and I didn't know my limitations, my approach was, I'm going to learn literally everything that the school teaches, and then I'm going to learn everything that the alternative histories do, and I'm going to find something about that. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to meet with as many wise people as possible that have different understandings of reality. And so while I was doing that, it didn't take me too long to realize that there was something about consciousness that seemed to be essential. It had to do with conspiracy theory. It had to do with larger realities. It had to do with spirituality and psychology. I was like, this is everywhere. And this is at bottom what I was attracted to. Probably because I grew up with my mom as a psychologist, though, right? So I was already tuned into philosophy of the mind and these kinds of things. So I was attracted to that and I followed that. And the healers, I was very attracted to alternative healers, especially healers that had an access to levels of reality that I used to laugh at, but now fascinated me. Like very sophisticated, intelligent, caring people that had a quality about them. And then they talk about, you know, the deceased relatives that are hanging out on my shoulders, my dog that died 10 years earlier, or that spirit owl that just landed on my shoulder. I wonder what that's all about. You know, I'd be sitting there like giggling to myself, judging them, making fun of them in my head, but also fascinated because I felt something. There's something to it. I'm like, this person is not wacko. This person has 2 BMWs in their driveway, a crystal John of God bed in their room, and they're telling, you know, I'm like, there's something about this. And the quality that I was attracted to the most, turns out all of those healers had gone to a particular school that was created by a guy named Jason Shulman. So at the time, I hadn't started a radio show. I hadn't done podcasts. I was not a public figure at all. I was just a true seeker. I really wanted to know. And I was in a unique position because of that willpower thing I shared earlier. And also the fact that I had no problem dying. I was like, bring it on. So my decision was, I made like a pact with myself. I said, I'm going to go further than anyone has ever gone into this. And I'm going to report back each step of the way until I die or something else happens. So I knew I was always going to be on the outside looking in if I didn't join one of these schools. Keep in mind, I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea what these schools were about. It was a 4-year program. It was going to cost like $20,000. I was like, fuck it. Let's go. Let's see what this is about. Best decision I ever made in my life, by far. But I did miss something that was key, right? So that's what brought me to the school. But those dreams I missed. It's an important piece. Before I joined the school and before I had solidified my understanding of a larger reality, I had been exploring the conspiracy theory and so on, and I'd reached a point of no return within myself. And I knew I was losing friendships. I was not being able to relate to people anymore. And I looked at the moon one night and I begged and I prayed and I said, please just let like a giant fucking mothership UFO come from behind the moon. Somebody just tell me that what I'm exploring is real so I can keep going. And it was a real prayer. I remember I was begging. Like I was like, please just give me a sign. I need a sign. And I was at my girlfriend's place, not where I lived at the time, and I fell asleep. And that night I woke up, I found myself walking through a parking lot down the road from where I was. And there my brother was sitting inside of a glass booth. And he looked great, shaved head like he did. He was a wrestler, like really good in shape, looked good, blue button-down shirt. I somehow just let myself in this glass booth and I sit down with him and he starts speaking to me telepathically. And he's like, what have you been doing? Exploring like conspiracy theory, Alex Jones, alternative history. Like, where you been? What you been doing? And I was like, oh my God. I was like, you don't know anything about any of this? I got to fill you in. I got to fill you in. And I was like, wait a minute, you're dead. Like, what's going on here? He looks at me, he smiles, and there's this look in his eyes. And I'll never forget it because I started to float up into the air, out of the planet and so on. But then his eyes became like a tractor beam and he pulled me back in. And telepathically, he said to me, you can do this anytime you want. I was so excited that I jumped on him and I hugged him. And the way I described it at the time was it was like taking 1,000 ecstasy pills. It was pure love shooting through my whole freaking body. But the craziest part about it was when I was there with him, I was also completely awake lying in my bed next to my girlfriend. So I know that because I made sure that I squeezed the pillow a few times to make sure that I was awake and I could feel the tactile sensations of my physicality in that reality, while I was also in this other reality with my deceased brother that was way more real than this reality that we're speaking in, if that can even make sense. This was my experience. So I somehow had, Jason has since told me, he said, you experienced the miracle. It makes me emotional because I feel like I did too. And I did what most people do after they experience a miracle. They make an ass out of themselves by telling everybody about it. But
We're
that's
grateful
part of my
to hear
path too.
about it. We're grateful to hear about it, Tim, because like your whole story is so beautiful and just like, I don't know, the real raw way that you speak about it and that you're sharing these close experiences to you, like it is super inspiring, and just to know that those things are possible makes me feel like things are possible. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
take that I'm coming in clear so far. It's not
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah. No, I
All
love
right.
it.
So, and by the way, that dream that I call that the culmination dream, the sort of like that was the ultimate. But my brother had been prepping me for that. There were a series of dreams prior to that had a different quality, where I'd be doing something in my mom's house, where I was always hanging with my brother, and he would come to me and he would say, "Hey Tim, put that down. We're going on a trip." And I would go, "I'm not going on a trip. I got to hit the gym in the morning. Got to see my buddies. I got work, And then I'd be like, "Wait, you're dead." And then he would lock eyes with me and smile, the same fucking smile every time. And I would float out of the room, out of the body, and I would wake up in my room, pop a pill, drink a beer, and wonder what just happened. Tell my friends, hey, this is still happening. I don't know what's going on, but this is really interesting to me. So he had done that many times. We're going on a trip, he kept saying. And I kept going, but you're dead. and then I'd float back in my body. And it kept doing this over and over again until finally I realized when I was floating up in the sky after the glass booth incident, I was like, oh, his eyes are are keeping me here. He's doing something. And I stayed there with him. I hugged him, and I knew I can do this anytime I want. So here's the kicker, right? You could explore many spiritual texts. You find this is called bilocation. It's actually not that uncommon. And there's actually something called after-death experiences where people experience, like thousands and thousands of people have very clear, exact experiences of what I described with deceased loved ones, the exact same thing. And it gives them the opportunity to say goodbye to unfinished business, everything, just to experience the love. But really, at this point, I see it as a profound healing. It's just like, and not just for me, but for the consciousness of this deceased people. Like it's like they're not as dead as we think they are, which is also a cool thing, So
I've had similar experiences where I see like it's something with the eyes. Like
yes, it's the eyes.
Something with the eyes.
It's the gateway in. It really, it's the gateway to the soul. And that's not, that's not some spiritual platitude. I mean, this is like what I've learned over the years, which will be my pleasure to share today, is this stuff is so practical.
Right.
When you understand how reality works, how the human design is in relationship to the way reality works, you can start to say, oh, okay, so this body I have is the aperture through which I can observe the universe and God and reality, depending on what your language is. So you might as well study it, so you know how the lens is obscuring or enhancing certain aspects of reality. But we can talk about that later, right? That's what got me into healing, because I realized if I wanted to see clearly and do what I wanted to do, which was go further than anybody had ever gone. I was such an egomaniac, but I really believed I could. I knew I had to heal, right? So I wake up in my girlfriend's bed after this ecstatic experience. So it's like 4 or 5 in the morning. I can't go back to bed. I'm about to run through a wall. So I literally did that. I ran out of her house and I went running. And I just went like, it must have been 5 in the morning because the sun was just barely starting to come up. You can start to see it. It's
Can
like,
I ask one thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to stop you. I didn't know that this happened like multiple times for you. Like how this happened
He trained me.
times. Like how many times do you think that happened before this experience?
Many more times than I was conscious of.
Okay.
But there were 4 trainings. It culminated in the 4th one.
Oh, you just
well, the reason why I'm so confident about that is because after it happened, I ran into a shaman and he stopped. He looked at me, right? Ran into a shaman. I was in Greenwich, Connecticut. Somehow this guy shows up. I had no relation. I was still beer drinking football player Tim. And now here comes a shaman who looks at me and he says, your brother is here. And he's saying, open your heart. And then he goes, they always say that. He says, open your heart. And then he said something about the number 4. What's the deal with number 4? And I was like, it's the 4th dream. And it's like, because I was telling people, I was like, it's the 4th dream. The 4th dream is the one where he got me in a state. That happened right afterwards, right? But even before that happened. So I'm running through the streets, right? It's 5 in the morning. Sun is just starting to show itself, like the light blue and so on, with the dark canvas in the background, trying to make it a little poetic, because it's like, really, it was an amazing experience. I'm running. A car pulls up alongside me and says, hey, are you a Rothschild? Guy yells that to me, older guy. And I was like, yeah, I'm a Rothschild. Like, what's up? I'm like thinking, like, what the fuck is going on? And he goes, I can't believe I just ran into you. I've been trying to get a hold of your family. We're trying to do a memorial for your brother. And I was like, okay, like, all right, like as if I didn't need another sign, but it's like I did, like, because I was in disbelief.
Yeah.
I was in shock, but the most wonderful, beautiful shock ever. It really wasn't shock. It was ecstasy, bliss. It was bliss. So since then, I did. He taught me how to do that regularly, and that became a major part of my life, traveling with him in that way for many years. But that's separate, right? What that experience did was I said, all right, I know firsthand what most people don't. And that emboldened me. That's the right word. I got brazen. I got real confident that I was onto something and that I had help. So that's when I dove full in and I said, all right, I'm going to do this school. And when I arrived at the school, I met Brenda Blessings, my teacher, which, by the way, was me and 17 middle-aged women. They were all like 50 and up, and I was 27 at the time. like total maniac. You know, they were so kind. It was actually important too. It's holographic because I was such a womanizer. So I was around women as soon as I committed to healing, whether this is a story or anecdotal or not, whatever, take it for what it's worth. But as soon as I committed to healing, all of my healing clients were women, and every class and spiritual thing I ever got involved with was only women. There was never a guy there. I just kept going, and everyone would comment. I was like, I know what this is about. It was like, I always just did that. I was like, oh, I'm going to use this to heal. Like, I see what you're doing. All these sexy women are my clients now, and I can't sleep with them. This is my work, you know? So it's true. That's really how I was living my life at the time. But I joined the school, and I see Brenda Blessings, my teacher, and she has this quality about her that I'd never met in anybody. And I was like, how did you get like this? I asked her straight up. I was like, how did you get like this? And she was like, I did this work for 22 years. I was like, what do you mean this work? She's like, I did the healings for 22 years. So I said, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
That I'm going to be a teacher. That it was either the first or second weekend. I don't know for sure, but I remember being in awe of Brenda and being like, I'm going to teach this. And so that's it. That's the rest is history. I've been fully committed ever since. It's been a wild ride, but that's why I stayed, and best decision I ever made.
How many years you would think, or how long have you been in this work? How many years?
I was 25 when conspiracy theory first landed on my desk.
Okay.
And I started to think about things differently.
Yeah.
I was 27 when I joined the school.
Okay.
And I'm turning 39 in September of this year.
Yeah.
So it's been 11, almost 12 years of the mysticism, right? But I in some ways I'm far behind than other people that have been doing this as long as I have. And in some ways I've had the blessing of being terribly ill for 6 or 7 years, which in many ways gave me my PhD in healing. It took me around the world to meet all kinds of healers and wise people and Western, Eastern magic. You know, like I had to look at everything because nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
So that forced me to change in a lot of ways. And so that's why I think I'm ahead of some people in some ways, because I really do understand what it's like to be suffering so much that you would happily kill yourself. But because you know that there's a purpose in it, you stay.
Right.
And that was my path for most of my healing work, because that kicked in, you know, say the year in the school, that kicked in for me heavily year 4. So I got robbed of my year 4. And then the next 6 or 7 years, I was not healthy enough to integrate the work, but I did show up to every healing and every class and every teacher. So I got something. And so let me finish up. So then since I got better within the last 2 years, it's been really some of the most exciting times in my life, if not the most exciting, because it's almost like a slingshot. Like I had to regress because I was so sick, but then all the spiritual concepts and everything, I had them all. I just couldn't get them in my body. And when I got healthier, I realized I was like, oh, you have to be really healthy to tolerate and hold this level of consciousness. And so it's just been like boom, 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 boom. And all these things are clicking. It feels like the heavens are opening up. And I say, I'm able to help people to a certain extent. I almost want to whisper it. I have like a small level of mastery, you know, and I'm like, I can help.
I can attest to this, just to say. Tim is my healer and has been for almost 8 years, probably around there. Tim has changed my life. So I love this because you're talking about how David changed your life, right? And then you guys ended up having this podcast together. And that's how I found you, was through your conspiracy podcast that woke you up, and you guys woke me up. So thank you, Tim and Dave and Mike, because for real, it really woke me up, and I heard like the excitement. I'm sure everyone listening can hear the excitement in your voice when you talk about this, but it feels like true passion, you know, and like true belief. Like you truly know there's something more, and like, I don't know, it's a difference. You can feel a difference, right? When somebody half believes something and when they wholeheartedly believe it. And I feel like you do. And when you talk about it, that's what inspired me. I was like, oh my gosh, I need that in my life. Like I need to heal certain things that are so deep. And I love what you said about how, I kind of want to talk about this for a second, but about how your consciousness has to be able to hold what you're taking in. Because that kind of goes into our topic of divinity. That's the same thing.
A
right?
great segue. Yeah.
Because it does. I feel like there's so much divinity around us 24/7, and the way that we live our lives now, right? In this like society of phones and having technology all over the place, like how, I don't know, how are you able to like tune into your own divinity and
Well,
around you, right? The divinity around you.
as we say in the school, the already present divinity,
Yes.
right? Well, in terms of that languaging, the already present divinity, it speaks to the revelation that Jason had when it comes to healing work, actually. Jason Shulman, who I believe is a genius, and I don't say that lightly. I took, very many years of suspicion and work in his work for me to get there.
Mm.
But he realized at one point that all energy work and alternative healing at one point was about bringing energy from me to you, kind of like Reiki. Like, oh, I'm going to give you this good healing energy, and the good healing energy is going to find what it needs, and we're going to heal you. I'm going to fix you up. It was very allopathic in a certain sense, right? And then Jason realized, because of his studies with Jewish literature and Kabbalah and so on, he realized that the Shema, which is, it basically says God is everywhere and it cannot not be here. And his understanding of that was, well, then if I'm bringing energy from me to this person, like who's bringing energy to what? It's God bringing energy to God. Like, I should be able to just receive what's already here. It's already here. God cannot not be here. So he experimented and he created the healing of immanence, which says, I receive the already present divinity in this person.
This is
And
the first healing we learn in the school, by the way.
yeah. And it's one of the, well, they're all like that, but it's one of the healings that really changes, and the effect and the power of it changes in relationship to the healer's consciousness. So depending on how you actually live and embody and perceive wholeness, if I can use that instead of divinity, wholeness in all things, including your brokenness and resistances and so on, the more the transmission of divinity gets received by the healee. And it's the way I simply put,
Maddie? Does that
I'll
make
make it,
sense? Yeah.
I'll explain.
Thank you.
You'll be able to challenge this a little bit more if you ever like started to do it on your own, but this is the simplest way that I know how to explain it. It's like, say I'm an English teacher and I got a second or third grader. I guess, you wouldn't have an English teacher at that point. Say I'm a teacher, it's an English class, you got a second grader there. I see that this kid is good at writing, and I say to him or her, you might be a good author one day. You could write some books. I see that in you. Suddenly, that potential is now activated. That kid says, I could be an author one day. If the kid was able to take it in, I could be an author one day. So now that potentiality has been made manifest. So like literally, the teacher's telling the kid what they see, their divinity or their authorness, brings that into physical manifestation. We're literally participating in creation here.
Mm.
And it's by observing and receiving what's already here. So this path is very much what I found is sweeping away all the stuff that's in the way, our traumas, our beliefs that are not helpful at all, our ideas of the world that are problematic, all the ways we contribute to our own suffering, our delusions, and so on.
Right.
Our job is to wake up to all of that and make it conscious. Because when we do, we can choose from a freer place. And we can be who we already are. We can live that divinity, which is what it's about, moment to moment. So does that make sense a little bit?
So well stated. I feel like that rings so true to me when I look back on my own life, like the things that held me back until I became aware of them. Like I was just sleepwalking through this life. And then once I decided to take a good look at like the deeper reason that I do these habits or why I act the way I do or why I'm reactive to this certain scenario in my life, like now it doesn't have a hold on me because I'm addressing it, I'm acknowledging it.
Yes.
And setting myself free from those things so that I can live a happier, more beautiful and compassionate life for myself and for others.
Right. I feel like on my own personal healing journey too, like I've felt that way where there's all these cycles that keep coming back around and I was asleep to them for a long time. So I would get frustrated when I'm like, oh, I'm just depressed. And it's like, oh, actually, there's a very specific thing showing up right now. And if I can become like awake to it and, you know, be curious about it, I'll get more information, and then maybe I can shift that cycle or that pattern. And that has been the biggest thing for me, I think, in this healing work and in this school, is being able to actually be aware of those patterns and start to take a look at them. Like, have the courage to dive in and look at them, you know? But also have compassion for where I'm at too. I feel like the compassion in the school is the big thing that keeps me going, is just like, it's okay, we're human, we make mistakes, like we have these big dreams and this place we want to get to, but if we're not there right now, like that's okay, you know, that's okay. If you made a mistake and, you know, you set a goal and maybe messed up one day, you know, like you keep going, you don't like beat yourself up for the failure. It's like, I don't know, I just think it's really beautiful the way that the school holds space for being human, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I love that so much. But I feel like we need people talking about how it's real to go through this spiritual journey of, you know, trying to find yourself. Like, what does that look like? Because it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Like, it's actually really fucking hard, you know, like hard to comprehend, right? Hard to go through uncomfortable things and start to realize the places maybe you don't want to be aware of, right? So I think we should talk about those things and what does it look like in a practical way for people who are starting their spiritual journey? Like, what do we need
Yeah.
to have in place? And compassion, as I was speaking about before, is definitely one of them.
Without a doubt, compassion is something that you earn and I think cultivate over time,
Right.
and you can start to experience different shades of it and different levels of integration, but it starts with an attitude, right?
Mm.
So many people think like, love my enemies or love this person. Like, I don't feel a warm feeling of love towards them or towards these shameful parts of myself. And I'm like, you're not supposed to. Like, that's
Yeah.
not what it's about. When we're talking about compassion and action or a loving attitude, we're just saying you're not going to kill something off because it's existing. You're not going to judge it out of existence and say this is no use, get rid of this. Brenda, my teacher, would say we all want to be little gods, saying this should exist and this shouldn't exist. And the non-dual healing, which I think is profound, is a radical form of acceptance because non-duality is all inclusive, right? So when you start in yourself, what does it mean to invite and welcome in all of the parts of yourself, right? And so it's one of our best practices to say, hey, you, the courageous one, come in and be here. You, the one who forgets to be kind to yourself, be here as well. You, the one who remembers wholeness from time to time. You, the one who is jealous, and you just name all these parts of yourself. And over time, you start to feel like, whoa, like some of these parts, I really work hard to keep out for some reason. Or maybe I judged the jealous part of me as, a major problem that needs to be gotten rid of. And then and only then will I be enlightened or whole or happy.
Mm.
And then non-duality says, do the opposite, do the counterintuitive thing and invite it all in. It doesn't mean that you allow bad things to happen. It means that you're willing to give something a chance so that it can reveal its heart and its intelligence to you, because it is intelligent. And the reason why it's here, this is why mysticism, you said, where can people start? I would say, find somebody smart who can tell you how reality works, not in the traditions that are mainstream. I mean, somebody who understands on a mystical level, this is how reality works. Because even if you don't believe it at first, they're going to give you a map. And they're going to say, go to point A, and this is going to happen at point A. And then you walk the territory, you get there. And if that happens, your trust in the map and your teacher grows. And then you can go a little bit further, right? Because you're not walking into some cult, right? I was still very suspicious. What's this all about? People are way too nice. You're asking permission to play with me. Like, what's up with that? This is way too kind. This is way, it made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you get that map and you follow it over time. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, like the point is that over time, your trust grows in how, if you have that smart teacher that says, this is how reality works, they would tell you this. They would say, as human beings, we're unfolding. This is just what's happening. Reality is just unfolding. If I was Ram Dass, I'd say you're becoming a butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't know. It's just has these crazy things going on and transforms into a butterfly, right? So as human beings, we're unfolding. And if we can have enough awareness or loving awareness to locate ourselves in that process without creating additional obstacles by pretending that this should or shouldn't exist, but instead inviting it in and being with it long enough to see its intelligence and let it transform us into more of who we already are, like that's the way, right? So the trust comes with the fact that, wow, this piece of my life I've been trying to keep out forever because it's terrifying, but I know that that's a part of my path. And I also know, like Sadie said, because I'm so kind and compassionate, I know if it feels too big right now, it is too big. I don't need to rush it because there's a million other things that could do going on with my unfolding right now. I'll work with those while I figure out a little bit more why this is so big. And I get a team of people around me to help support me so I can metabolize the bigness. And then, finally, I have a more whole relationship to this terror and I realize where it came from. And now the next piece shows up, and then you deal with that and then the next piece shows up. And reality is trustworthy in this way.
Yes.
And if you're not awake to it, I just want to tie it back, and I promise I'll stop, to the spinning or the spirals that you're talking about, the patterns.
Yes.
Right? If you can know that reality is offering you these patterns and these spirals over and over again because it's saying, hey, wake up and come into relationship with me in a new way. I keep coming back because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not transforming. If you transformed, your consciousness would change and that problem wouldn't be there anymore. It just wouldn't be, because the level we're working on, we outgrow our problems. We don't solve them. So that's all I wanted to say.
I just feel like that has been the biggest, most transformative piece of like non-duality and like this work, is being able to sit in something so uncomfortable that like I don't want to be in, right? Like I'll be so uncomfortable like crawling in my skin, but then also have the compassion that like, oh, but like that's okay that I feel this way, right? It like gives you more permission to be uncomfortable and be in those things. And the compassion, like I said, is really important. And I also want to speak to the support piece that you talked about, because I think when you're starting your own like spiritual journey, it is very life shattering. It's hard to talk to people about it. You feel a little crazy because you're experiencing all these synchronicities and you feel shaken up of like, whoa, wait, like there's more to this life. Like you feel a little weird, in your body. Like you don't know how to. This was my experience. I'm going to speak for myself, but I feel like a lot of people have this experience a little bit of like, now how do I relate to the world in this new place that I'm in? And so I think one of the key things is support, like you talked about, having a circle of support around you. And Tim, you've been a huge support for me my whole life, my whole spiritual journey. So I appreciate you for that. But also just having, and Maddie, you too. Oh, both of you. I love you guys. Okay. I just got so like heartwarmed that like you guys are both such a big part of my own journey. So I appreciate you both, But I think having the support is key, because you can feel a little shaky, like coming into this new reality that all of this is actually happening, right? And I also want to mention, for the people that are very logical and like scientific, a lot of these things are scientifically proven. The things me and Tim are talking about. Like some people they might like click off this podcast because they're like, whoa, that's too woo-woo, right? But I just want to like mention that these things are scientifically proven. Like this is how reality is working and playing out. So I love that we're talking about it. So how do we bring like more divinity in? Actually, let's start off with, what is divinity?
I've never come up with a definition before, so if I was going to sort of wade into it right now, the qualities of divinity have something to do with, number one, recognizing that God is in all things. Right? So even the most messed up of things,
right,
somehow is a part of the whole. And again, you don't need to accept it in the sense that like you want it to continue, but you need to accept that it's a part of the whole, because then you can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
So divinity has something to do with that acknowledgement that all the most broken parts and so on are all part of the whole, and it's about wholeness. Recognizing the wholeness. And the reason why people need a healing around that is because they can't see their own wholeness, because they're so caught in shame and self-judgment. Right? Because we're wounded, we're traumatized, we've been told certain things, and we were born into a culture that splits us in half. And it says that, our worth is based on what we do and how we produce, and has nothing to do with the fact that we're born and it's our birthright. This probably has something to do with the Industrial Revolution or the Enlightenment, back in the day when, human evolution goes through cycles, and we wake up to certain stuff, we forget certain stuff, we make things more whole, we forget it again, we fall in love with science, we forget the magic, we fall in love with magic, we get lost in superstition. It's like we're finding our balance here, you know but right around the time all these machines came onto the scene, people started to look at themselves in the world in a machinistic way, however you pronounce that, right? Like everything was mechanical. Like, we're made up of these pieces and parts. I've got this heart that's pumping and these veins and this thing, and it's all like these separate things working together to create this machine we call the body, right? But we learned to draw. It became all about production and like, what can you put out there, and that's how I'm going to value you and myself and so on. And so we lost ourselves, and it became really it's a crisis. I really, it's a crisis, because the majority of people, what happens is, when you don't know your own divinity, it means that you're literally going to spend your whole life sort of chasing something or avoiding yourself, because you don't want to feel the shame, and you can't feel the shame, so you have to keep doing. You literally have to keep doing. It's why you try to sit down and watch Netflix and you feel guilty. And
Yeah,
you've got
me and
those
Maddie
thoughts,
are
I should.
victims of this.
Yeah,
Me and Maddie are definitely victims of this,
everybody.
like the go, go, go thing. Like, we talk about that a lot on this podcast because I think it's such an innate thing. And I think it's becoming more of a thing the more that all this is pushed in our face. Like, if you even just think about how much information we are taking in from screens on a day to day, like, how do you actually be in your body at all throughout the day when you have 15 screens like beaming this like attention grabbing at you, right? Or you can't be in your own self because you're feeling a little uncomfortable. Let me pull out my phone. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just what we all do, right? Like, it's becoming more of a thing. And I just feel like it is,
Mhm.
yeah, it is a crisis, like what's gonna happen when everyone's zombies? Like, who knows? AI hooked up to their brain, like who knows where it'll go? You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's kind of scary. I feel like recognizing this divinity and like trying to be more in yourself, or maybe going in nature like me and Maddie love, and being able to like be out there and truly just be. We're gonna lose that if we don't have people like us who have the courage to dive in, right? And question.
Well, and I think what keeps coming to my mind through this conversation is like, how can people acknowledge their divinity? And I think Tim was touching on it, where it's like, maybe the beginning is just acknowledging what a miracle it is that you are born and that you're existing on this earth. Like, if you take a step back and think about how miraculous that truly is for us to be here, existing, breathing, our body's functions, its ability to heal itself, like that acknowledgement helps you understand that this has to be a divine experience, and that every person around you and living being is divine. And I think once you acknowledge that within yourself, your divine or your divinity, it's easier to start recognizing that in others and approaching people from a compassionate, loving place, and, treating the earth with more respect and animals with more respect, and viewing life through that lens helps us be better people ultimately. And it holds this sacred energy of, we are divine because God is within each of us, and we are all gods, and we are all uniquely important to this universe.
Right. Very well said.
Yeah, it's well said. You're speaking to, what it's like to embody and hold that kind of consciousness, right? And we talked about, you give a healing with that consciousness, it changes a person, and you too, and you participate in creation in that way. But also, right, if you are going through your life and you're holding this kind of consciousness, it's a challenge, and there's a lot of spiritual stories that talk about what happens when you inevitably forget, when you inevitably start relating to yourself again like you are a machine that can be told what to do, or a horse to be whipped, as if your body is not this living breathing process, and a part of the miracle and divinity of your being, right? It's like we forget these things. So Jason, something I read about Jason many years ago that I never forgot because I was like, well, this is it. He says, if you can stand consciously in the face of change, that's the way out. And if you don't get it at first, that's all right. I'm going to unpack it, because what he's talking about is he's saying moment to moment, reality is always changing. And there's going to be a time where something about reality changing is going to give you anxiety, and it's going to bring up your trauma. And when that happens, you're going to fall asleep, and you're going to contract, and you're going to suddenly believe it's me against them, because you feel threatened and you need to survive, and you're thrown into your history and so on, right? So the work is, where's the divinity in that? What does divinity look like when you're wrestling with something like that? What does divinity appear to you when it doesn't? Like that kind of paradox, and that's why I realized, I was like, oh, you need to be physically fit to do this work. Because it's just too much freaking energy to stay conscious. I can't do it. I don't want to. Like a little kid in me, I don't want to, because you have to feel and you have to use that energy, So I would say that about that. And then also, one other thing that you can do, another trick you can do, is take a moment. You can meditate on it, but really just wonder and think about how everything is connected.
Can we,
Like,
can we just like do something right now? Like, I feel like it keeps coming up for me. Okay. Someone's speaking to me and they're telling me we need to do, like, we keep talking about these meditations that really help and these ways to do it. But I just really feel like we need to do a little practice right now with us and with our listeners. Like, why don't we do like a little?
I got one.
I knew you would. That's why I had to mention it. I
Give
just
me
feel
a sec.
like it'd be a good practical way for people to feel what this feels like and what the energy is like. Because I think, Tim, me and you have been doing this work for a very long time, that me and you can talk very deep about these things when sometimes we don't recognize that people don't know what it feels like, right? Because we're in it. And so I think it helps to do these little things so people can get a little reminder and a little feeling of what that is, right?
You're absolutely right, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Because I see a part of my mission, just because the way I'm built is,
Yeah.
I can connect, this esoteric stuff to more of like a commercial audience.
Mhm.
It's just because I used to be in sales, I know how to communicate in that way. So that's where I find myself. I'm like, oh, I can do something here.
Yeah.
And so I'm always thinking about, right, like, who the hell is going to voluntarily walk into their suffering? Like, what kind of person is going to say, you know what, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being terrified and facing my demons and my ghosts,
Yeah.
Like, who the hell is going to do that unless you know that there's something in it for you,
Right.
right? So I've been trying to figure out all these modalities and ways to get people to see what's possible first, and then get them to stay for this non-dual work, because that's really where it's at. Because we really want to go deeper into how the ego works, heal the ego, and understand something about ourselves and reality, and have a real transformation. But that doesn't mean that we can't use magical healing modalities or other things to quickly show somebody how effective this can be and what's available to you, how much freedom is available, because that's what it's about. This is all about freedom. So yeah, before we do the meditation, I just want to set it up, because like I said earlier, I think Jason's a genius. And as a mystic, he saw the way reality works. So he created all these different exercises or meditations to put you in a position where you can't not heal. Like, if you're going to engage with it, you're going to heal. So the exercise I'm going to give today is called One Life. And the One Life meditation, in some ways, it might remind you of other things that are true in the world. Like in AA, they have the serenity prayer and other things, right? So like, truth is truth, right? So Jason's not creating these new truths out of nowhere, right? He's just, in his own way, he's telling the truth and helping people find it themselves. So I say, if this reminds anybody of anything, great. It just means there's more truth out there, right? But this is a non-dual exercise that does something that helps you simultaneously be with your life as it is and allow the transformation that needs to happen to occur. So it's the embodiment of, I'm imperfect just the way I am, and that's perfect. Or I'm perfect just the way I am, and I have a lot of work to do. It's that paradox, right? So as humans, we have to somehow live that paradox if we're really going to have the healing that we're after. Make sense? So this is a short meditation, just a couple minutes, and I'll guide you through it.
So anyone, if you're driving, pull over. Or do this when you get home. Push pause. Don't do this meditation while you're driving, please. It's a deep one.
Just like any other meditation, you just want to kind of sit quietly and just breathe for a few moments. Or maybe if you're listening to this on a recording, you could give yourself a few minutes to settle in. If you've had a crazy day, or I don't know, maybe you just had an argument with somebody, and you just need to take whatever time you need to settle down and just be here as best you can. So you might notice your breathing. You don't have to change it at all. Just being with it, noticing is enough. Right? It's keeping you alive, and that's sufficient. And now we'll go into the meditation. I want you to say to yourself internally, or if there's nobody around, you can say it out loud quietly to yourself. But say to yourself, there is no life but this one. There are not two lives, one with and one without wholeness, or God, or reality, or one where I feel whole and one where I don't feel whole. There are not two lives. This doesn't mean that things will remain the same. My life will continue to change and transform. But right here and now, I am willing to accept, to be with, to receive my life as it is. As you allow yourself to do this, to enter into this moment, this time and place, also let yourself know, even if only a little, that it is by being here that you enter into the place where reality helps us change what we need to change and simultaneously be in life as it is. This dance of change and acceptance, which is ongoing, takes place here, now, in the present moment. And stay here for a few moments as it is. And now you can open your eyes and make a few notes, if you like, about what this was like for you. any resistances or victories or revelations. It really doesn't matter. It's all information, and it's all a gateway to wholeness. So whatever comes up, that's what you need. It really is that trustworthy.
I personally just love how it ends as it is. Because for me, that's how I try to go through my life, is accepting what is as it is and going from that point of view rather than trying to shift and change everything, like letting things happen as they will. And I liked when earlier you said life is an unfolding and existence is an unfolding. And I always like to imagine that like a lotus flower unfolding, the beauty of that. Like, let it unfold, let it be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what you're saying is not a small statement. You know, it's in some of the most advanced spiritual traditions, you know, we talk about not doing, the art and practice of not doing, and how hard it is to not take what's appearing in your life and to say, I know what this is, because that's based on your memory, right? So you just froze something, so it's not really what it is, because that thing's already changed from when you last saw it, or like, you know, anything like that, right?
Hmm.
And ultimately, you know, I do find it, based on what you're saying, Maddie, you know, it sounds like you are finding your way to Taoism, you know, because there's a way, you know, if we're a wave on the ocean is moving in a particular direction, and we could be a little wave creating suffering for ourselves, or we could wake up and we can move with the ocean, you know. And all spiritual traditions talk about this, right? In Christianity, it's not my will but thy will, you know. And other mystical traditions, are you a drop in the ocean in the drop? Yeah, it's like you talk about all these different ways. So let me submerge myself in the oneness, but not lose my identity in some way. And it's all like, how can you be awake to the fact that there is something going on? Or the river swims the fish is the way I usually explain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how can you be awake to that? And they say, you know, you have to have like both eyes on the way. You really have to be like paying attention and knowing when you're falling asleep. Because if you fall asleep, that's the little wave saying, I need to go this way because I'm terrified of where the current is going. And I have a lot of compassion for that because I do it too. I still do it with all my awareness and all that because I had a traumatic childhood. So there's plenty of times where maybe I didn't get a lot of sleep last night or I fell asleep and I do all the wrong things and I know I'm doing it and I still do it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, look at me. Look at me doing this. You know?
Ditto.
Yeah.
I feel that it's very frustrating, but also it just teaches you more compassion, right? Of like, oh yeah, this is still here. Like, I just want to speak about what happened during the meditation for me really quickly because it just brought something up that, yeah, I want to talk about a little. So, during the meditation at the part where you're talking about like just being present and then you like give them a second to be with it, right? It's towards the end. Right as you said the word be present, and then I'll give you a minute, a fly was literally flying around, hitting my mirror. Like I like keeps running into the mirror. Like I can just hear it. And then it comes over and starts buzzing around my face and like just bugging me, like right after you said be present. And instantly it just brought up the thought of like how that's life. Like we're here trying to be present and trying to like be our spiritual selves, but then there's life over here like talking our ear off. You know what I mean? Like the resistance is always going to come. Those things are always going to show up. But I honestly think it all comes down to the choice part of it. Like, but we actually have a choice of what we're going to do with this cycle or this pattern when it shows back up, or life shit when it's hitting us in the face. What are we going to do with it? You know?
Yeah.
Are we just going to look at it and avoid it forever and have it get worse and spiral? Or do we want to make like conscious decision and choice to choose us and ourselves and be able to like step into the uncomfortableness a little bit. It all comes down to a choice, right?
And I think that's what all spiritual work is about, really, is about freedom.
Right.
And being conscious of as much as you can so that you can choose from a freer place and you're not a victim of some master you're serving inside yourself that you're not aware of, or some historical ghost, some
Right.
voice telling you what to do. I say to you, made a great point there, just in terms of sort of, you're trying to be present, and here comes this spiritual fly, right? And like, you're trying to like be present because you have this idea of what presence is. And then here comes reality, sort of asking you to open your idea of what presence really is to all the shades of it, right? Because like, what does presence look like when I'm a mountaintop all by myself for 3 years? Nobody's in the way. What does presence look like when I'm in a float tank? Literally nothing's in the way. What does it look like after I achieve enlightenment and I go back into the marketplace and the first person I buy something from sells me some, broken piece of crap? How am I going to react then? What's presence look like then? What does presence look like when I wake up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. to write poetry? I mean, like, seriously, it's like part of the presence is, can I be in relationship to everything? It's a really hard task, but as much as you can be. And over time, our ideas of what these things are break down so that we can be, reborn in a much healthier way. That Taoists would say, like, you're a servant of death if you're rigid and brittle. You're a servant of life if you're soft and flexible. So, you need to know that you can't hold on to anything in this work. Jason says, not knowing, as you go through life, not knowing, you can't know anything, but paying attention. And he said that was like his 8th grade biology teacher that told him that, because his teacher was teaching him everything, but he was wise enough to say, I don't think any of this is going to be true in 20 years.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful.
And that exercise that you guys did, ultimately, the ultimate manifestation of that is to get it in your body, to be able to feel what it feels like to want to change your life, to want to split your life into pieces and parts and say, the grass is greener over there, or when I lose 20 pounds, then I'll be happy, or once I do this or that, then this will happen, right? But until then, I'm going to suffer. And what the meditation says is, you're doing it wrong. And you're creating problems for yourself by striving so hard and creating these goals and splitting yourself, because you may not even realize it, but you're denying parts of your life. And non-dual consciousness, which is the ultimate healing, says you can't deny anything. So somehow where you're going is going to have to include all of your life right now. So you better start accepting it. You better get the intelligence that's within it. And if you don't know how to do that, you just find somebody smart that's done this themselves and they'll show you.
Right. So I feel like that's a good spot to plug, Tim.
What, healings and stuff like that? Yeah. Well, I am
Or
growing my
reach out to
practice.
Tim. Yeah.
My God, I am. I'm growing my practice. I'm in a place where I'm feeling very generous and inspired. So like, if anybody is suspicious or paranoid or doesn't believe this or just wants to try it out, I'd be willing to do stuff for free. I'm not even kidding. And like, I'm doing free logo synthesis sessions for anybody that's interested, because like I said earlier, people don't understand what's possible. They don't realize what's possible. And I may not be able to do this for free forever, but for now I can. And my hope is that if your life changes, and it will, continue with me if you have the means and if you're serious, or if you know somebody else that might be interested, send them my way. Because my take on this is, like I said earlier, with a little bit of mastery I have, I think we have a very unique path that Jason has created. And I've spent the last 12 years integrating it. So what I've found is, in the last 12 years of doing this healing work, like having a practice, it's like people that have been all around the world with some of like the most world-class healers and stuff, they haven't encountered this consciousness. So I'm not saying I'm like world-class or anything, but I generally almost always have something to offer because of what Jason's created. And so that, to me, it's very humbling and also very exciting. And it empowers me to say what I'm saying, like, just come, show up, get to know me, and see if I can help. And if you're serious, we'll continue, because this is all I want to do. So that's my pitch. Go to the thirdthing.net or the Third Thing Network, all spelled out, .com.
Perfect. That was beautiful. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say, Matt, to wrap this up?
Just a big thank you, Tim. And also for everyone listening, like, you matter, your journey matters, your pain, your suffering all matters. And just know that you're important and what you're experiencing does matter, and we're here to support you. We've been talking about this a lot on the past 2 episodes, that we're here for you and we're all going through this, and we want to hear about where you're at, whether it's a spiritual journey or just your life journey. Just this life, we need others, and we want to create that community with you guys, so reach out.
Yes, please. We would love that. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great, wonderful week, and that meditation just set things off right for you. Because it did for me. I feel like since the meditation, we've all been a little more centered.
Yes.
So thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks to you both. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. Well, we love you guys, and like, review, and subscribe, and reach out to anybody and share this episode that you think would benefit from it, or that's interested in spirituality and what the journey is like, because we all go on our own separate healing journeys and they all look a little bit different. But I feel like it's really, what's the word? It feels good to hear from people who have been on their own spiritual journey to see what theirs was like. So, as we just shared ours, share yours with us, like Maddie said. And yeah, we hope you guys have a wonderful next couple weeks. Bye.